He wrote a book about chasing the Indy 500 while fighting cancer. Meet Ray Hartjen, musician, author, and chronic storyteller who's turned illnesses into insight. Today, we'll peel back how that journey intersects with innovation, risk, and obsession, the same forces that drive today's auto world. We'll discover how Ray's storytelling equipped him to see trends in automotive. Writing a book on the Indy 500 teaches us about perseverance under pressure, how crisis, personal or market, can sharpen vision and fuel innovation, the core mindset shifts needed to lead in disruptive times, how to challenge narratives and purpose into building influence in the automotive or any other niche that you're into. Ray is a musician, a writer, a content marketer with a career spanning investment banking, consumer electronics, pharmaceuticals, SaaS, and storytelling. He authored Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma Immaculate, How Steelers Saved Pittsburgh, we're going to be talking about that, and his latest, the Indy 500, a year-long quest to win the greatest spectacle in racing. He's also a vocal advocate for cancer patients with caregivers, weaving vulnerability, purpose, and resilience into his work. If you love behind-the-scenes drama, mental grit, and intersectional insight between life's biggest bets and the auto sector, this one is for you. Ray, thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on the Motor Files. I love what you're doing, and I appreciate this opportunity. It's an honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's an honor as well. Your career has leapt across industries from finance to tech to storytelling. Now, what led you to orient so many pivots around the narrative, even in sectors like consumer electronics or SaaS?
Yeah, I've had a common theme in all the different types of positions that I've had was storytelling. I had many career pivots, but it always revolved around telling some type of story, whether it was in investment banking, organizational development consulting, human resources work, corporate communications, public relations, marketing. It was all trying to connect with a customer, sometimes internal customers, sometimes external customers, and engaging them. As humans, we like to engage with stories. We beg for stories to be told to us when we're children. It's mommy, daddy, please tell me a story before bedtime or what have you. You just follow in that type of a narrative, created a fiber that was woven throughout my career of engaging customers with storytelling.
Well, I miss those days with mommy and dad reading us the storybooks. Not anymore. Everyone has to be up and about and running around, trying to, keep the roof over our heads. The Indy 500 book, what drew you to that subject? Did you see auto racing as a metaphor or something deeper?
When I was a child, probably around third grade or so, here in the United States, we have a program called Scholastic America. Then catalogs that your teacher at school would pass around, and you would select books or posters. And then about a month later, the box would come and your teacher would pass out their little treasures. When I was in about third grade or so, around 1973, I stumbled across a book called The Indy 500 30 Days in May. It was written by a man named Hal Higdon, a man who rose to fame writing about running marathons and long distance later in his career. But this book, Chris, just captivated my imagination. I was a child. That book was a chronicle of the 1970 Indianapolis 500 and won by Al Unser, his first Indy 500 victory. It followed the journey of racing teams and these characters from the opening of practice all the way through qualifications and onto the race and at the end of the race. And as a young reader, I was just captivated. In the 1970s, race car drivers were like astronauts. It was a very dangerous sport, but it was these sleek, sexy cars. It was glamorous. And I just fell in love with the event, the Indy 500, and the sport, motorsports. And for years, I read that book multiple times a year. And I just became a fan of the sport and the event. And I always wanted to rewrite the book. As I said, the Indy 500 30 Days in May was a chronicle of the 1970 race. I thought, wouldn't it be great to update this book for a more modern race? So that's what I did. That's what I tried to do with the Indy 500, a year-long quest to win the greatest spectacle in racing, is a look at the 2024 race. So it starts with the last two laps of the 2023 race, and then goes through the entire year of preparation and build-up to the 2024 race. And then the book ends with the victory banquet the day after. So it's a book that I hope at a minimum, that it just inspires some other reader to become a fan of both the Indianapolis 500 and of the sport of motorsport.
I was thinking while you were talking about the book, it would be nice to probably do like a mini video on it or something. A lot of people, we don't read anymore, but some of us do. Yeah.
Writers like me tend not to read very much anymore. Even articles, it tends to be reading headlines and maybe the first paragraph and then on to something else. But, videos are, just a couple of years ago, book trailers, like movie trailers, were a big thing. I have not created a trailer for the book. So maybe I should. Maybe I should just offer up some author reading passages on my YouTube channel or something like that.
Yeah, even with my book, it's a small book telling us the tricks and trade of how to be a successful parts manager. And these policies and these procedures are used by successful parts managers all across the world. But I'm trying to put it into a video form as well, because the older generation, such as ourselves, we know the importance of reading. Mm-hmm. It keeps the mind engaged, and it also increases the vocabulary as we go along. But, we're fighting a battle on all sides these days. So we have to try to accommodate as much as possible. It's just a food for thought. There.
Well, in the process of converting my cancer patient memoir, me, myself, and my multiple myeloma, into an audiobook. My wife, for example, she consumes almost all of her books through audio format. Whatever your customer's preferred method of consumption is, that's what we should offer. So if you like an ebook, I'll give you an ebook. If you like a paperback book, I'll give you a paperback book. If you want an audio book, let's give you an audio book. And if you want a video, by golly, Chris will make a video for them, right?
In 2019, you were diagnosed with multiple myeloma. How did that moment recalibrate your priorities, your storytelling, and your willingness to take risk?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with multiple myeloma, it's a blood cancer. It's a incurable blood cancer, but a treatable blood cancer. And in 2019, when I was diagnosed, I began to grow from it, Chris. I began to learn. And it started really with 2 weeks after diagnosis. I was committed to being the best patient I could possibly be. I was working out hard. I was eating well, but I was just consumed with this idea of being a cancer patient. It was the first thing I thought about when I woke up in the morning, and pretty much the last thing I thought about when I went to bed at night. And then during the day, I thought about it quite a bit too. And, after a couple of weeks, Chris, I was exhausted. And it dawned on me that, I was physically exhausted, but it dawned on me what really was driving the exhaustion was being mentally and emotionally exhausted, maybe even spiritually exhausted. And that's when I became aware of hey, I am more than just one aspect of my being. I consider my whole being to be physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So, being a musician, I'm familiar with a mixing board and being able to rise levels of bass or treble or different instruments and so forth. I recognized then that some component of my entire being might be so strong that it can lift up that lag. But at the same time, those components might threaten some of those areas of strength that I might have. I came to that realization sitting at dinner, too exhausted to read the menu at a restaurant, going out with my wife and our son. And, I began to think on that and said, what else can I learn about being a cancer patient? What about me? And, I quickly kind of fell back, into an exercise that I facilitated many times during my professional career for others. And it's a timeline exercise. So you out there in the audience, it's really easy to follow along, whether you have something to write with or not. It's easy exercise. You can use your mind for it. Just draw a horizontal line from left to right. And then on the far left-hand side, a little tick mark, far right-hand side, another tick mark. So you have a segment. Then on the far left-hand side, under that tick mark, you write the letter B. That stands for your birth. And on the far right-hand side, you're probably one step ahead of me, everybody. Just write the letter D, and that represents your death. And that's the timeline of your life on this planet. And then the introspective part is, where do you believe you are on your timeline? And for years, Chris, I would facilitate this exercise. I would just kind of haphazardly, with not a lot of thought, put my tick mark right in the middle. Because I was going to live forever. And if it wasn't going to be forever, it's going to be for 100 something, right? And, post-diagnosis, being honest with myself, I was able to say, you know what? I'm much further to the right than I thought I was. So what does that mean to me, right? When I started thinking back on that, and I thought, what that means is, I think that in the past, like a lot of humans, I've been guilty of taking time for granted. I would take tomorrow for granted, next week for granted, next week and next month. And in thinking on that further, like if I take time for granted, how did that manifest itself in my life? Well, then I was able to articulate to myself, Chris, that I took people and relationships for granted, right? And so that timeline exercise just kind of sharpened my focus of what are the things that I want to do? What are my goals and objectives? the what I want to do. And who do I want to do it with? Who are the people that mean most in my life? And who do I want to bring along on this journey? And that kind of snapped me into some motivational mottos for myself. One was, if not now, when? I was guilty for so long of thinking of things like, one day I'm going to ... Well, if
Mhm.
not now, punch today in the face. The idea that today is an opportunity. Today is a gift. And Chris, not everybody received the gift of today. How do we honor those people? How do we honor the day itself? And how do we honor ourselves? Let's seize this opportunity. For those two sayings, if not now, punch today in the face, put them on the back of shirts, sell them at gigs. Us starving musicians always like to make a little extra money at gigs when we can. But it also led me to doing things like writing these stories, writing these books that I wanted to get done, collaborating with Tom Olenek, my co-author for Immaculate, How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh, our first book. And then, my latest book, which is coming out in October of this year, my first ever novel, Outflanked. This is in another example of motivating myself through, if not now, when, and punch today in the face.
Well,
We're
yeah,
yeah,
well
dude,
put.
driven by approaching my diagnosis with a growth mindset, right? And
Mhm.
I didn't consciously set out to do that. I just discovered one aspect of learning, this whole
Yeah.
thing that I am more than just my physical or mental being, that there's a more complex being about me. And that learning, that awakening for me just led me to pursue, what else can I learn from this about myself? And I
Mhm.
think it's one thing that I like to speak to people about and encourage them. Don't wait until a diagnosis of a serious illness
Yeah,
to
that
make
is
these
true.
self-discoveries, right? What can you do to think introspectively and make these self-discoveries? And maybe as a result of it, make some meaningful changes in your life.
Hmm. Yeah, you just reminded me of the poem called The Dash. They usually read it at funerals,
Mhm.
how you live your life, and the dash is the in between.
Yeah.
So from the beginning to the end.
Mhm.
So, and the dash now is how you actually impact people and things. What value did you bring to this world? And how will people actually remember you? What contribution were you there? What positive impact you had on your life? But you're right. We have to look at things in terms of perspective, where we are as we go through this trajectory. Up
Not
every
just
morning.
It's not just your legacy and what you leave for others. It's also what you give yourself in the present, right? If
Mm,
we all want joy and peace of mind and satisfaction. And I have found that by concentrating on things that mean most to me and with the people that mean most to me, I'm able to go to sleep at night with that sense of satisfaction, that inner
mhm.
joy, that peace of mind. And like I said, I think we all strive for that. That's what we all want, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just the legacy and what you provide for others, it's what you provide for yourself. And everybody out there, you're a great person, man. You're the best person. You're the best you can be, right? So, you deserve to feel good as well.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you shared that personal journey with us, because I have to encourage even most of my friends were in and around the same age, and we have to be telling people, go and get your executive profile done at least once per year.
Mhm.
So that way you can catch you can detect or catch what it is. Something might be hiding. You may never know. Your blood work, X-ray done, MRI done, get everything done. Right?
It's
People are, men, we're scared of getting our scrotum touched or
like a
right.
colonoscopy or something like
Yeah,
early detection of anything is better than a late detection. I can tell you when
exactly.
I was diagnosed, I was feeling great, but a routine blood test showed that I was anemic. And so we
Mhm.
explored the root causes of that anemia, went through a lot more sophisticated blood tests, eventually went to a bone marrow biopsy. And that bone marrow biopsy returned the fact that 90%, 90% of my bone marrow was cancerous. And I
Mm,
consider that to be an early detection because a lot of
yeah.
times multiple myeloma patients get diagnosed because of unexplained bone fractures. And
Mm,
I had not had the cancer seep into my bones yet. So I haven't had the need for radiation therapy and the like. But I was feeling great. My performance metrics for my workouts were every bit as strong as they were in the previous
mhm.
5 years. Illnesses, serious health considerations can sneak up on you. So, first thing I tell people to do is you got to go see your doctor annually and make sure that examination includes a routine blood test.
Mhm.
Stay ahead of things. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say.
Yeah. Why work your life to accumulate all that wealth in terms of what you want, and then you turn around and spend it back on your health? So that's another thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration. But you've called yourself a storyteller, which you are in all phases. How did the lens illnesses change not just what story you tell, but how you see your audience, your mission, and your art?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Chris. One thing I really learned from doing the cancer patient memoir, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma, is authenticity, writing in an organic manner, and being truthful. To truly engage, particularly around that topic, I had to be completely open to my health. And a lot of people are very protective about their health, but
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a resource. When I was first diagnosed, I had the honor of participating in a patient support group for patients of a variety of types of cancer. And in my time of need, those brave cancer warriors kind of showed me how to be a patient, showed me how to fight this, to address cancer and to go on this journey and to fight back. And they motivated me and I committed myself to saying, I want to be like them. I want to be a resource for others that follow me.
Mhm.
And so, how can I do that? How can I be of service rather than just seek to have others be of service to me? And, that was just telling my story and being able to hopefully communicate it in a way that could resonate with other patients, caregivers, and allies. And I got to tell you, Chris, the honor of my life, true honors of my life are spending the last 30 plus years with my wife, Lori, our two children, Olivia and Raymond. But, following those things, it's engaging with patients from around the world because of the book and being able to just create a trusting, safe harbor. I have patients, Chris, that reach out to me through social media and through email that talk about how they're scared upon their recent diagnosis and they don't feel comfortable speaking with their families about it, yet they trust me. And that's the
Mhm.
biggest honor that I've ever been given. It's been, an incredible journey. Yeah, I was on an interview, maybe about a half a year ago, and a woman asked me, would you change your diagnosis? It really caught me by surprise. I was like, oh man, I got to think about this. What a question. But the first instinct that came back went with, and I said, you know what? I don't want to have cancer. I would rather not have cancer than cancer. But I'll tell you what, Chris, I don't
Mhm.
think I would change my diagnosis because my diagnosis 6.5 years ago changed the trajectory of my life, but it's made me a better person. It's made me in all of my roles from husband, father, friend, boss, employee, writer, entertainer, teammate, bandmate, whatever. In all those roles, I'm a better person, better human, and I like this version of Ray better than the 2018 pre-diagnosis version. Yeah, I wouldn't change it, that. And it's an introspective journey, and I
Yeah.
encourage everybody out there to try that.
It has helped you to focus more on the finer things in life. So you've watched tech, electronics, media, and now racing. What blind spots do you see in how the auto world markets innovates or tells its own story?
Yeah, it's interesting that some of the questions that we talked about previous to the recording of this episode, it's the idea of vulnerability and crisis. And we all hit that, whether it's personal vulnerability and crises or if it's professional. When you look at the collective of a company, an organization, or what have you, one of the lessons learned from vulnerability and crisis is from reactive tactics. So many times in the marketplace, and I look at my personal marketplace with my health, it's that reactive tactic to what the diagnosis is. Something has happened. Maybe it's a disruptive supply chain, a faulty product that needs to have a recall, or maybe it's a diagnosis of blood cancer and multiple myeloma. But you start thinking about reacting. How do I react to that? The lessons learned when you think back of it is how can you shift from being a reactive organization or a reactive individual to being proactive, to being strategic, and to be able to prepare for resilience. Go see your doctor, get your physical exam, get your blood test, and then be able to be strategic and be proactive, be ahead of the game, and prepare yourself for resilience. Because when those things happen in the marketplace or to you as a person, then you can be opportunistic, right? You can seize upon those opportunities that present themselves, create a competitive advantage. So when I think about the auto industry is all the time racked with these things that happen in the global market. And how can we react to that and respond as quickly as possible to these strange things that happen? Like, for example, disruption in the supply chains. What are ways that you can learn from that while you're being reactive? Also make plans to be a bit more strategic and proactive and prepare for those ahead of time.
Mhm.
The last 40 years or so, the whole idea of just-in-time inventory in automobile manufacturing really kind of revolutionized your ability to produce gross margins, positive cash flow. When surprises happen, like a COVID-19 pandemic or disruptions in the supply chain that continue to result from that, now auto manufacturers are thinking, how do we diversify our supply chains? How do we build up a bit of inventory where we can't produce a final product because we don't have a semiconductor or what have you? Let's have multiple part suppliers. Let's have an inventory so we can keep the
Mhm.
lines open. It's a complete value proposition. So I think there are interesting parallels between individuals, collective organizations, and the whole idea of vulnerability and crisis. That makes sense to you, Chris?
Yeah, I know it does, because what you're speaking about is something that I've experienced back in Jamaica when I was working in the auto industry. You're living in a small country, so exponential crisis always happens from time to time, whether it's crime, political violence, something that happens in the United States directly impacts the supply chain along the way. So we were forced to always be strategically ahead in a thing called a strategic defensive mechanism.
Yeah.
And I saw that full blown during the pandemic when a lot of dealerships crumbled and folded during that time, and they were being bought up by all the big auto groups all across, especially here in Ontario. But what had happened is that they were not prepared for COVID-19. And but because they've never been exposed to so many different situations all at once. But we were trained at the time that we always expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
So if something happens at point A, we can always roll out plan B, C, D, E, F, G. That is how we were actually trained for it. Even now, setting up this podcast, if this camera goes down, I draw for the next one. So, but basically, this is what it actually shows. But it also highlighted the way how well the lack of experience there off with a lot of the people who are in charge. So there's, the experiences that you're going through right now, you're able to look at these things from various perspective to say, okay, this is how I'm going to get this done, and this is how I'm going to deal with this. And now you're able to offer consultation to people who are actually going along the journey just like you. So if it goes right back to the auto industry, I tell people all the time, one of the main reasons why they're struggling now is because of the lack of experience. And the people with the experience are leaving the industry because the industry does not reward those who are trying to keep it afloat. That's basically what it is. So if they had...
I like the whole idea of good judgment is often born in experience, and
Mhm.
experience is usually gathered by exercising poor judgment. Right? You have that learning experience, many times learning by failure. You learn
Yeah.
what works, what doesn't work. You also learn maybe different approaches.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically where it is. And it came at no surprise. So, because people weren't planning ahead of what could happen, even though it's affecting Ford, for example. There was a shortage of vehicles. Some of the dealerships over here started increasing the prices because they wanted to maximize as much profits as possible, utilizing the pandemic as a way of gouging their consumers. And now that the supply chain is up and running again, then you have the prices are so high, people are scaling back because people are now looking at themselves and say, is this really important right now?
Yeah.
Right? Hell, right now I'm willing to either park my car and go take transit because I know it's going to take at least an extra 20 or 30 minutes out of my time. But what I need to do is probably just go to bed earlier and stop watching YouTube channels at night. So people are going to make the adjustments where necessary. And especially, your experience again is a living proof. You are going to have to adjust your lifestyle in terms of what is transparent, what has transpired in terms of your health. So different experiences, these different experiences, different personalities, and we have to try to understand each other and learn from each other's experiences as we go along.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've learned over the years is to try to harken back to when we were children, Chris. And when we were children, we had this beginner's attitude because we didn't know anything, right? We didn't have life experiences. So we would go out each and every day in this kind of mode, whether it was conscious or subconscious, this mode of discovery. And then over time in school and in life, we learned things and we experienced things. And then by the time we were teenagers, we knew everything. For those who are listening, not watching, I'm using little air quotes. When you're a teenager, I know everything.
Yeah.
You can kind of maybe walk through your adult life thinking that you're doing more than you're learning. And so I've tried to reverse that process. It's like, let's explore things with that beginner's attitude again, that discovery. I can discover about myself. I can discover about the context in which I find myself in. And I find asking questions and listening instead of talking is a great way of learning more about not only the context that I find myself in, but learning more about myself.
Definitely. Because we want to learn more about the Indy 500. The Indy 500 isn't just about speed, it's drama, it's legacy, it's a spectacle. How can automakers, EV brands, and mobility ventures borrow that narrative muscle to win actually win hearts and win support?
Yeah, that's a great question, and kind of a metaphor for the auto industry. And there's a long-standing relationships between racing and cars. I mean, people have said this all along. The first auto race was created when the second car was built. But just instinctively, people are like, "Well, you got one, I have one. Let's see who's faster. Let's see who can do this course the quickest, or what have you." It's win on Sunday, sell on Monday, right? The
Mhm.
importance of for brands, automotive brands, to excel on the racetrack is a way of getting that attention. I like to look at the process of the Indianapolis 500. I follow it from a year-long type of process. It's more than just showing up at the day for the day at the races, and everything rides upon it. Winning this race changes lives. It changes lives for the driver. It changes lives for everyone associated with the team, right? And there is only one winner, and that's just like it is in the marketplace. In the race for the customer, there's one winner, and then everybody else is first loser. The
Mhm.
Indianapolis 500, there is no Formula One style podium where there's first place, second place, third place. There is first place. You go to the winner's circle, it's elevated up, you get your wreath, you get your trophy, you get your ring, you get the celebratory traditional glass of milk, and then you're ushered off of it, put into the backseat of a convertible, and driven slowly around the 2.5 mile oval to get serenaded by cheering fans.
Mhm.
Second place, if the telecast hasn't gone over, might get an interview from pit lane. Big
Mm.
difference between first and second place, right? So
Wow.
it's that race for the customer, there can only be one winner. Everybody
Mhm.
else is first loser through second loser through third loser. And it's a process. It takes immaculate planning. It takes teamwork. A driver, you can be the best driver in the world, but if you have a poorly prepared car, you're not going to succeed. So
Mhm.
it takes a team behind you. And there's usually, it's easy for even a diehard fan to know of a driver, to be able to recognize their face, to recognize their name, say a driver like Pato O'Ward for Arrow McLaren, but you don't know the team behind him. You
Mhm.
don't know that Kyle Moyer is running the team
Mhm.
necessarily. That team is so important. It takes that entire team. It takes the car preparation, and then it takes that ability to not only qualify for the race, but come race day itself, so many variables that you have to prepare for
Yes.
and you have
Mhm.
to respond to.
Mhm.
Weather, as the weather changes during the course of the day, the
Mhm.
characteristics of the track changes, and therefore how your car handles on that track. So you have to anticipate those changes, right? Do we need to put a little more downforce into the car to be able to navigate the corners safer and faster? All these little types of variables that you need to ingest the data, make the right changes, and then put yourself in position to win the race at the end. And I think that's so important to the auto industry. You look at the Indian manufacturers in the Indy 500, it's Honda and Chevrolet, but having that opportunity to win the race and then be able to go out on Monday, say, hey, a Chevrolet powered car won the Indianapolis 500. What can that possibly do for the marketplace? It's extraordinary. I think there's a lot of parallels. There's certainly this vested interest from the auto industry in auto racing, and that support is critical. I think there's a lot of parallels to how you approach the race, to how you approach your marketplace and your race for the race win, as it relates to the race for the customer and winning the customer and producing that value proposition.
Yeah, definitely. When you hit your darkest treatment days, what kept you pushing forward? What leadership lessons emerged from that terrain of fragility?
We all have challenges and we all have struggles. It's how you respond to those. It was the realization that I'm stronger than I knew. Being able to face this adversary, multiple myeloma, there were doubts to begin with, but as I began to experience it, I'm like, hey, I can do this. And I like to tell other patients that, hey, you are stronger than you know. When you are pushed, you have the ability to push back. But then there's something
Mhm.
else, Chris, and that is together we are stronger still. So
Mhm.
individually, I'm stronger than I know, but you and I together, stronger than I can be by myself. So,
Mhm.
united we stand. And, it's building that team around you. And I like to tell that to other cancer patients, man, I am there for you. And I know you're there for me. And together as a community, we are strong. And so those are the things that kind of just kept me going. And, what am I going to do? Not only for myself, but what am I going to do for that cancer fighter to the left of me and that cancer fighter to the right of me? How can I help them today? How can I be of service? Because together we're in this. We all get something, Chris. We all
Yeah.
get something. Together we are strong, stronger than we are individually.
A lot of people don't understand that is the ultimate secret to humanity, the ability for us to come from all walks of life and work together. And
Yeah.
that's what makes us successful. But
We forget that because we have these idiot leaders politically that it just seems to be the way to do things now is divide. We're going to
divide,
divide
yeah.
and conquer,
Yeah.
divide and conquer. That doesn't make anybody stronger, the division. What makes us strong, we're the same. Our
Yeah.
similarities are so much more than our differences. And together we are strong. And you can see that in anything, whether you're a sports fan or what have you, when there's togetherness, the cohesion, the unity, that's
Yeah.
really strong.
Yeah. It's by design. From an outsider's lens, how do you think disruption, EV autonomy, climate shocks forces auto brands to lean into the narrative and vulnerability?
Yeah, disruption snaps you out of the status quo, right? You're in the status quo. It's kind of like me in that timeline exercise earlier, where tomorrow kind of looks like today, and then the next day kind of looks like tomorrow, and so forth. So
Hmm.
disruption snaps you out of it, snaps you out of the status quo, the routine, forces you to adapt, respond, improvise, perhaps, or whatever.
Improvise, yeah.
But there's
I
that.
always, I always run a serious joke amongst my friends and said, the best way to solve everything over here is to have a major disruption. COVID didn't do it, but there's something else is needed. So we can actually look at what's far more important than watching the negativity all around us. But if you had to leave one narrative, one ideological imprint on the auto mobility industry, what would it be?
That's a very good question. I think engagement, right? And the striving to be able to tell the story of a brand, of a product, of a
Mm,
service, of an experience, the way that we all like that engaging story where you create something that's compelling, a character, whether it's a product, an experience, a service. You
mhm.
develop, goals and objectives, where they want to achieve it. You present the challenges, the struggles, the good fight, and you overcome and you come to a satisfactory conclusion is the blueprint for about every story ever created, every movie, every book, every song or whatever. And it's those engagements with people when you're trying to achieve something at scale. The only way you can get to scale is to take those first steps. So winning at scale means winning at many points of individuality. And I
Yeah.
think that's that engaging, compelling story that just captivates imaginations, captures attention, and that delivers value, that delivers a service. Did that
Well,
make
and that's what we're fighting for these days. The new drug is attention. That's basically what so many of us are fighting to try to get people to focus on. I
Mhm.
tell people focus on what's important. But what's one decision any founder, engineer, or marketing executive should make differently right now if they want to be remembered?
To answer, maybe to ask the question and to answer the what if,
Mm,
that creative spur of creativity and be able to play that out. You might have one particular process. You're designing a part or what have you, designing a car, designing a plan to execute at a race or whatever. But then start thinking about the what ifs. What if we did this? What if the marketplace turns like this? What if during the race, a safety car comes out halfway through and we haven't had a pit stop yet? And being able to just kind of work those machinations out through your mind. We talked about contingency planning in investment banking. It's the what if file. It's the
mhm,
what if a earthquake happens off the coast of Japan and tsunamis. Then you start
mhm.
kind of looking through what's the market play, right? I
Yeah.
know it's kind of like maybe an inhumane way of thinking about it, but it's like, what are going to be the impacts with insurance companies in what countries and how's that going to affect foreign exchange rates, interest rates maybe, and what's that going to relate to the economy? And ultimately, here's the play that you have. So
Mhm.
one thing I'd encourage everybody to do is ask those questions. What if, dot, 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 and then think those things through.
You take the words right out of my mouth.
Oh,
And even if you go back to the analogy where you're speaking about the 500 and how much work it takes, it's similar to the Formula One. People watch the movie and they focus on the drivers. They don't focus on the team behind the driver who's making the driver popular, who's making the driver more successful. When it comes into that pit, how fast they work to get that car within 5 to 7 seconds. They have to get the wheels off, wheels on, back on the road, everything up and running. But it takes millions of dollars. But again, we just want to see the cars going around the track. And we don't look at journey and how much sacrifice each of those individuals have to make in order to get to where they are just to be a part of that particular team.
yeah. And
So
one thing I like to point out to people who are maybe just even casual race fans, Formula One, bigger teams like Mercedes, they'll have 1,000 employees. And you
mm,
might Kimi Antonelli, a driver, and George Russell, a driver, and you might know Toto Wolff, who's the team principal. but there's 997 others
Yeah,
that are all
exactly.
working together to make that team competitive. A staggering amount of teamwork that's associated, and everybody responsible for their role and optimizing their processes, but also optimizing the entire process. Things that you can learn through Six Sigma and the like. It's not optimize the sub process. You might have the very best pick, but there's all the other processes in place to get from beginning to end in the quickest time possible. It's fascinating to me looking at the infrastructure of a race team, even a small race team, watching sprint cars race around quarter-mile dirt ovals in the Midwestern United States. That's still a collection of 5 to 7 people that are making that sprint car possible.
You mentioned Six Sigma. Do people still use it?
A very good friend of mine travels around the world espousing the principles of Six Sigma. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's simply the elimination of variations in processes. And it is a staple for manufacturers, but now, growing even more and more into the transactional world as well.
As well, exactly. And the ISO standards and all these other things that we have to learn growing up in management. Wow. Ray, thank you for letting us ride alongside your journey. For the auto world, if you want to build more than a product, if you want to build meaning, this is a fuel you'll need. Below, you'll find his books, his newsletters, and an opportunity to pitch your story. Drop your biggest narrative challenge in the comments. I just might bring Ray back to the workshop for him to give us some more enlightening stories. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, share it with someone who needs this perspective, because the best car brands don't just move you. They actually move you. Ray, do you have anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I again want to tell you, Chris, I admire what you do. Thank you so much. For you out there in the audience, if there's ever anything I can do for you, particularly if it relates to facing a serious health challenge, either of your own or as a caregiver and ally, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can reach me at any social media platform. And it's my name, Ray Hartjen, RayHartjen. It'd be my honor to engage with you and to hear your stories and to see how I can help you. So please let me know if there's anything I can do for any of you out there in the audience. And thanks again, Chris. Thank you.
This has been the Motor Files podcast, and I will catch you in the very next episode.